more fucking walls and drones and bombs and guns to keep them away, and so that we can watch them die with clear consciences, it's going to be because we've been loaded with the ideology that these guys are now starting to express publicly. On the other side of them, you have people who are saying in full fucking voice, no, we have the resources to save everybody, to give everybody a fucking decent and worthwhile existence, and that is what we want, and that is the fucking real difference between these two. So you can tell that to the next asshole who tells you that they're actually two sides of the same coin.
And my question is now.
Here, let's look at the United States comparisons on how this.
In the United States, the middle class has played a central role since its very inception. America is often referred to as a nation of small businesses, and small business is a big part of American ideology, often standing in as a symbol of individual freedom and independence. Thomas Jefferson's ideal citizen was the self-sufficient and independent landowning farmer, an ideal that retained its appeal even as it soon became obsolete in the face of expanding markets. And during the Cold War, small business owners and their ideals in both urban and rural areas were used as a bulwark against the spread of communism. To this day, small businesses play a very significant role in America's self-understanding and are generally viewed very positively.
One day I want to own my own business, be my own boss. Probably nothing embodies the essence of the American dream more than that thought.
There's a lot of idealization and romanticism surrounding small business, both on the right and the left. Small businesses are seen as personal, relatable, and admirable. In a 2017 poll, 70% of Americans said they have a great deal or a lot of confidence in small businesses. And I get it. In our world, small businesses bring a lot of local color to many places, and allow for products and experiences that you couldn't get anywhere else. But we shouldn't let such romanticism blind us to the many problems that small businesses often come with, because they are still businesses in the end, and that means profit is their primary motive. In the United States, small businesses on average pay lower wages, provide worse benefits, are exempt from crucial labor protections, and due to their small size tend to make unionization difficult, which tends to leave small business employees with little to no bargaining power. In the US, federal law requires businesses to provide medical coverage after discharge only if they have 20 or more employees, and family and medical leave only if they have 50 or more employees, thus exempting many small businesses. And anti-discrimination laws, whether against race or gender, only apply if you employ 15 or more people, all of which often allows small business owners to be petty tyrants towards those they employ, and they will sometimes use their status as small business owners to justify overworking and underpaying people. Whether small or big, businesses compete in the same market, in which success requires ruthlessness. And to this day, the American petty bourgeoisie have a significant effect on the divisions between the political left and the right.
If you want to make America a better place for everyone, especially for minorities, forget social activism. Instead, start a business.
They not only provide opposition to labor-oriented reforms, they also have served as the mass base for today's right-wing populism, which, as we shall see, reveals several of the same class patterns that we saw in German fascism. Consider the Trump campaign and the MAGA movement. For the purposes of this video, I'm not going to discuss whether it is fascist or not, but it is today's leading form of right-wing populism in America. The media often describes MAGA as a movement of the white working class, and while its ranks do include many white workers, I think this label overlooks the movement's middle-class character. Data from primaries in 2016, for instance, show that much of Trump's support came from middle-income voters, whose average earnings were a lot higher than those of the average American. And while income should not be equated with class, it does serve as some preliminary indication. But as a way of zooming into the class dynamics at play, I'd like to focus on the January 6th Capitol riot, as it's a particularly extreme expression of the MAGA movement. And just as we'd expect, the petty bourgeoisie, namely small business owners and the self-employed, were overrepresented among the Capitol rioters. There was a floral shop owner, a CEO of a skydiving company, owner of a chiropractor practice, owner and president of a tax guidance company, owners of real estate companies, owner of a car dealership, self-employed insurance agent, CEO of a data analytics marketing firm, and I could go on and on. This social group was much more likely to be found among the Capitol rioters than among the general voting population, and were even more overrepresented among those Capitol rioters who were violent. Trust me, once you recognize this trend, you never stop noticing it. While blue-collar workers were present, white-collar workers were a lot more common, and were also likely to be relatively high-ranking managers, who some categorize as petty bourgeois as well, because...
Yeah, so this is what I talked about a lot. This was an HVAC business owner riot, right? Like, That's what it was for the most part.
Because of their increased status and the power they have over subordinate employees. So it's completely misleading to see this event as a representation of the white working class, let alone the general working class. After all, the rioters came from all over the United States, which means that these were people who were well off enough and had enough economic power to take time off work, pay for traveling expenses, whether by bus or plane, as well as a hotel to stay in, just to attend a Trump rally, which is already some indication of its class character. These were people who were drawn to the MAGA movement because they identified their individual freedom with the freedom of business, and saw all government efforts to help and assist the working class and the unemployed as obstructions to their personal success, explaining their common resentment towards welfare recipients, for instance.
Because owning your own business represents freedom. You are independent. You are free. And that's exactly the reason big government despises.
The American modern right-wing movement also is very good at universalizing their outwardly awful policies. They never say, we are here to defend big businesses. They say, small businesses are the backbone of the American economy. We're here to support small businesses. When in fact, their policy agenda is greatly beneficial for big businesses. Okay? That's why when Republicans talk about tax cuts, they always talk about tax cuts for the middle class. We're going to do tax cuts for the middle class. We are going to help out the middle class. Deregulation is going to help out the middle class, small businesses. That is a lie. What their open goal, and as Trump demonstrated in his 2017 tax cuts, is to cut taxes for the wealthiest in American society and the corporations, because of the corporate tax rate. There's a reason why in the Trump tax cuts that came in the last Trump regime, the tax cuts made for the top earners in this country and the corporate tax rate were actually permanent, whereas tax cuts for the middle class and everything under the top marginal tax rate was actually slated to sunset. All of those tax cuts are supposed to sunset in 2026, I believe. Just so you understand, that's not what the video is saying. I don't care what the video is saying. I'm giving additional context to the way in which America propagandizes American politicians and American political movements oftentimes propagandize certain positions that are inherently harmful to the middle class, which is a very specific designation that is supposed to take you away from understanding the class dynamic from worker and capital owner to begin with, okay? But it's just something you need to understand. Both parties are also capitalists. Both parties also represent the interests of corporations. That's precisely the reason why the Democratic Party is directly at odds with its base of support.
Small business.
And yet, at the same time, as we saw with German fascism, this also comes with attacks on big capitalists, often represented by people like George Soros and Bill Gates, which often comes along with various conspiracy theories that don't stray far from anti-Semitism. Conspiracy theories about the collusion of left-wing protesters and labor unions with powerful elites like George Soros. That very same flavor of middle-class paranoia, a phenomenon that is difficult to make sense of if we don't recognize its petty bourgeois character. This also helps us understand America's right libertarians, who otherwise also seem hopelessly contradictory. Why is it that so many of them, who are supposed to be anti-government, end up moving towards fascism? Once again, the right libertarian movement is populated with a lot of petty bourgeois individuals who identify their freedom with unregulated business activity and attack the government for its obstruction of this freedom. And yet, whenever their business begins being threatened either by the demands of organized labor or simply by the ruthless tendencies of the market, they end up wishing for a strong government which would wield its iron fist in protecting their business against these threats. Recognizing it also helps us immensely in making sense of different responses to the COVID pandemic. Among the anti-lockdown protesters, the kind who equated social distancing with communism, the petty bourgeoisie were, you guessed it, overrepresented. In Minnesota, as one example,
the subtle line appealing to middle-class frustrations is the standard of living for what we think is middle class is only achievable for small business owners. Both parties never appeal to the working class, but only an amorphous, intangible middle class that hasn't existed for decades. Exactly. There is no real, straightforward worker. I guess there is to a certain degree. It's like the professional managerial class. Okay. There, to a certain degree, the professional managerial class, is a part of that equation. Like we're talking about we're talking about people with college degrees and whatnot. The Democratic Party captures the attention of that base. The Republican Party, on the other hand, captures the attention of the small business owners who actually receive what it looks like to be that mythical middle class. But ultimately, the notion of like a group of individuals that like work in a fucking factory and have a house and have a comfortable, meaningful existence with a single income, like single income households with one person working as a wage laborer and being firmly in this like middle class standard is non-existent in this country.
Those pleading to reopen the state during the pandemic were overwhelmingly small business owners, proprietors of hair salons, massage parlors, a bowling alley, vacation rental, etc., who put up slogans such as "small business is essential." And this makes sense as the lockdown was impeding the profitability of their businesses, in some cases to the point of bankruptcy. Also, in some cases, impeding their ability to spend their disposable income. Some protesters, for instance, expressed their dissatisfaction with the lockdown on account of not being able to get a haircut or not being able to go to a golf course, which is not a particularly working-class concern. The fact that the lockdown was indeed threatening many small businesses incentivized the spread of various conspiracy theories, again expressing that middle-class paranoia, claiming that the virus was man-made or that it did not exist at all and was simply a tactic to push America towards communism. The working class also had a strong response to the pandemic, which came with an increase in worker strikes, and their demands could not be more different from those of the petty bourgeoisie. The striking workers, who were very well aware of the dangers of the pandemic and were at high risk of infection, demanded not only improved working conditions, but improved safety measures, improved access to safety equipment, and increased precautions against the spread of COVID. Nothing could show more clearly just how important it is to differentiate.
And there are far more of these people, albeit their organizational capacity is infinitely more limited because they do not have the freedom that like a small business owner has. But there are far more of these people out there, working class people, wage laborers, than there are small business owners, okay?
Differentiate between the working class and the petty bourgeoisie if we want to understand the nature of different political movements and actions. This is not to say that some small business owners did not have legitimate concerns. The US government definitely did not act quickly and sufficiently enough to help those whose livelihoods were severely threatened by the lockdown. One legitimate concern was the fact that given America's privatized healthcare system, many small business owners depend on the profitability of their business in order to pay for health insurance for themselves and their family. The fight for universal healthcare is an example of an issue over which the workers and the lower middle class could potentially unite. Now, while we do see these very clear patterns in the relationship between class and politics, it is also true that today people vote according to their class a lot less than they did 100 years ago. Yeah. And many of today's political divisions are drawn along lines of race.
Are YouTubers small business owners? Yes, absolutely. Yes. Technically, myself included. It's an owned and operated business. So I still get paid for my labor and not for making others work for me. I don't own like a channel overall where like other people are working under me and working like there is no way that I can continue making money if I just stopped streaming. Okay. But yes, technically, YouTubers, especially many other YouTubers that have like, you know, ginormous fucking businesses, do this. Like they are firmly within the small business owner category.
Gender and culture. And that is something that was actively and purposefully achieved by the ruling class, which has always tried to produce internal splits within the working class and to bring workers over to its side using cultural issues, a tactic which in recent decades was especially pioneered by Republicans. And this is a problem because it points to a lack of class consciousness among workers, which leads them to lash out against fellow workers.
What do you mean, plenty of ways for you to make money if you don't stream? Yes, of course. But most of them, like there are a million different ways that I can continue earning money off of the pre-existing the capital that I have. Capital accumulation is an avenue for me. Okay? Yes, but that would change the dynamic of the way I earn currently. That would turn me into a capitalist rather than someone who still has to work to earn his income. A lot of people misunderstand how this dynamic works, and they think, for example, athletes, very wealthy, right? They get these massive contracts, right? So they go, excuse me, athletes are bourgeoisie, okay? And many of them are, but not in the way that you think they are, okay? Athletes' massive contracts that they get from the sports franchises they work for is still very much wage labor, okay? A lot of them then take those contracts and turn around and start their own businesses in which they become capital owners, business owners, and therefore capitalists, okay? LeBron James's endorsements and also his wages that he gets from the Los Angeles Lakers puts him in a wage laborer category, okay? Whereas LeBron James's many investments into other businesses puts him in a capitalist category. That is how this works.
Workers, rather than those who actually exploit them. This is not to say that the Democrat Party is free from blame either, as it has been consistently disappointing the poor and working class for decades, and has been thereby leaving people feeling like there is no worthwhile alternative. The decline of class consciousness has been further intensified by what I would call the petty bourgeoisification of the working class, the attempt to disarm class struggle by making workers identify more with the petty bourgeoisie than their own class. This is seen when working class people see themselves as temporarily unsuccessful business people rather than workers, entrepreneurs on the grind rather than sellers of labor power. And this is exploited by various companies. Consider, for instance, Uber, which has utilized the slogan, "Be your own boss." Although Uber drivers are gig workers who are materially generating profit for Uber, Uber tries to convince them that they are in fact self-employed bosses. Thus, while offering them terrible working conditions, they sell them the promise of being petty bourgeois. And all of these problems are further confounded by a lack of genuinely working class organizations, ones that would build working class autonomy. And history shows us that few things are as effective in combating fascism as organized labor. And now I'd like to thank my patrons, who fund my petty bourgeois existence. 404 error, just undo it.
Is a good example landlords? Yes, landlords would be passive earning, like earners. Passive income means you do not have to go out and directly work to get a wage, okay? You do not have to go out and work to get a wage from someone else who is paying you. Passive versus active income.
Pundits dinner happened this weekend.
Anyway, this is Matt Christman talking about the rise of American fascism.
Just passed completely unremarked upon, but that wasn't the case because, the comedian they booked, Michelle Wolf of The Daily Show, the headlines for the last 48 hours, just nonstop debate about whether she was mean to Sarah Huckabee Sanders, whether it's okay to be mean to Sarah Huckabee Sanders, what is comedy, are comedians heroes, and should the whole White House Correspondents' Dinner be hit with Agent Orange?
Living in hell is a lot more boring than I thought it would be.
Yeah, it's just, this is a conversation that is designed to dominate everything on your social media and like in the news and the news media talking about itself and entertainment. And just like, I want to turn it all off. I don't care. I don't care about any of it. It's just like anyone taking just like a really hard stance on any of this is just, I just don't know what to make of it.
Well, the most insane thing is that, as they say on Battlestar Galactica, all of this has happened before and all of this will happen again. Because this same fucking debate happened, people have pointed this out, the same thing happened 10 years ago with Colbert when he was at the Correspondents' Dinner, I believe 2006, and he roasted Bush to his face, and everyone was horrified, and there was a whole debate about, did he go too far? Is there such a thing as too far? What are comedians supposed to do? But real heads know that this actually also happened 20 years ago. Because in 1996, Don Imus was the...
Bro, the chatter who sent this to me is so fucking lame, dude. This has nothing to do with what we were talking about. You just wanted me to play a clip of Matt Christman, who I love, and the Chavo Boys. Like, some of you motherfuckers really abuse your linking privileges. I swear to fucking God. What does this have to do with, like, how liberals collaborate with fascists historically? Stop sending me the 3 Arrows video. I'm not going to watch a 30-minute video from a podcast, okay? I know it's great, but it is not good for... This is the guy. Matt Christman is relevant here, explaining the American dynamic of fascism, and nails it from 4450. He did not talk about American fascism at all in 4450. What did the chatter say? No, man, keep listening, I swear.
At the White House Correspondents' Dinner, and he did a bunch of jokes about how Bill Clinton was a horny freak, and that caused a giant wailing and gnashing of teeth. There was no Twitter, but if there had been, everyone would have lost their shit. It's the same fucking argument over and over, and nothing ever changes about it. It's enough to make you go and...
Wow, you guys are so hateful. It's wild. Why do you encourage so much hate in your chat? I feel like it doesn't accomplish as much as your usual empathy does. Brother, you have to also present enemies, ideological enemies, people that want to do harm to others, as exactly what they are. I will never lie to you. I will always tell you what my own personal convictions look like, what my own personal opinion is. Okay? And I will continue to do so in an unflinching manner. Do you understand? This is not an encouragement to hate. This is actually directly calling out who is spreading hate in American society. Okay? If one party is actively pushing to mass deport, if one party is looking to actively push mass deportation, fight fire with fire, I get it, I just don't agree. No, I'm not fighting fire with fire, you dumb fuck. What is wrong with you? God damn, you are the fucking white moderate that I'm talking about. That is so, that just like endlessly refuses to understand nuance in the situation. Listen to me. Listen to my words. Do you think there's a difference between good things and bad things? Okay, if you do, then you have the capacity to understand that mass deportation is very bad. Okay, that's my position. Maybe you disagree with it. We can have a conversation around that. And if you think mass deportation is objectively fascist, if mass deportation is objectively fascist, then obviously you can't, you have to openly recognize that this is American fascism that's laid dormant for many years and is very active now. Yeah, I'm being mean. I'm being mean to people who want to do harm to others. Like,
speaking on behalf of a hegemonic liberalism that is going to get us all fucking killed.
It's got a lot of money.
I agree, don't talk to them, but because they're distraction from the real fucking problem, which is that fascism arises because of the collapse of institutional legitimacy of liberal institutions. And that's how we got fucking Trump. It's how we're going to get what's coming next after him. That's going to be even worse. Because if you think there's not going to be more ecological and economic catastrophes in the future that liberalism is wholly unsuited to fucking deal with, and that failure is not going to lead to fascism filling that fucking hole, you got another thing coming. And that's what these guys are. These guys who marched in Charlottesville, these are the people who are aware of the unspoken premise of this sort of zombie neoliberalism we're living in, which is that we're coming at a point where there's going to be ecological catastrophe, and it's going to either require mass redistribution of the ill-gotten gains of the first world or genocide. And these are the first people who have basically said, well, if that's the choice, I choose genocide. And they're getting everybody else ready intellectually and emotionally for why that's.
That chatter linked 44 as the minute marker. I went back to 7. There's a difference between the 7th minute where he's actually kind of talking about it. It was 20 seconds away. Sorry, I missed the timestamp.
that's going to be okay when it happens. Why? They're not really people. When we're putting all of this
HasanAbi, dude, don't get me wrong, dude, but you are doing this to monetize this, dude. I mean, your shtick gets you bucks, dude. Please, dude. Yes, dude. That's why I'm doing this. Except I could be doing that with a much greater amount of fucking much greater amount of money that I could be making, and also simultaneously getting a shit ton less scrutiny if I were to do this for a grift. If I was a grifter, I wouldn't be grifting to the left, okay? Because dumb fucks like you do not have this kind of attitude or opinion towards the right. You think that they're honest brokers of the truth, okay? It is infinitely easier to grift to the right. Shut the fuck up. There is a reason why there aren't that many people like me who are both openly leftist and also very successful, okay? The American institutions and the American public is unimaginably hostile to any sort of progressive politics, okay? You can fucking sit here and chirp about like how much money I have all day, every day, and that is just simply a way for you to not understand the things that I'm talking about. Oh, I don't have to listen to him. I don't have to listen to him because he makes money, which I think is somehow at odds with the way he is presenting, with the way he's presenting the things that are harming me right now. He's trolling, dude. I know. But this kind of stupid attitude is definitely, infinitely more popular in the broader public than you think, okay? It might not be a popular sentiment in this community, but that's it. Wow, you must be so poor grifting for the left. No, you dumb fuck. If I have the capacity to explain a concept that is impossible for Americans to fucking understand under normal circumstances, don't you think it is infinitely easier for me to actually shill right-wing sentiment, right-wing thought? Why are there no prominent examples of people actually having thriving careers after they fucking move to the left? Okay? Why are there infinitely more examples of people always hitting the fucking right-wing pipeline? Why? There's no way I can read these posts, dude. Okay, dude, take 5 minutes off and you know, come back later. This is simply a way for people to refuse to take in the message. And it's just a way for people to go, nah, I don't fucking agree. I don't agree with anything this guy's saying. Not because I'm going to internalize what he's saying and maybe put forth a convincing counter argument, but instead I'm going to literally just, force myself not to listen to anything he's saying and be uncharitable because I have perceived hypocrisy here. That this person and his existence is at odds with his worldview when there is no such contradiction there. Okay?
money into more fucking walls and drones and bombs and guns to keep them away, and so that we can watch them die with clear consciences, it's going to be because we've been loaded with the ideology that these guys are now starting to express publicly. On the other side of them, you have people who are saying in full fucking voice, no, we have the resources to save everybody, to give everybody a fucking decent and worthwhile existence, and that is what we want, and that is the fucking real difference between these two. So you can tell that to the next asshole who tells you that they're actually two sides of the same coin.
And my question is now.
Anyway, now we watched Why Middle Class Supports Fascism with Why Middle Class Supports Fascism with Cuck Philosophy. There's also the German Revolution, which I'm not going to get into too much. I think Best D Marks had a video on this as well. Specifically on the way that like liberals have turned around and showed their bellies and actively collaborated with Nazis. There are a number of different documentary style videos on this process. Unfortunately, many of them are super long, and I want to just like arrive at, social democrats, for example, and the role that they played in actively suppressing the communist anti-fascist movement in Germany. That is what I'm looking at. Okay, that is what I'm looking for.
Ebert and Gustav Noske. Gustav Noske was a party functionary that had become a prominent deputy, an enemy of proletarian internationalism. He had declared at the Reichstag during World War II that socialists were not, quote, vagabonds without a fatherland. He had tried to convince the bourgeois parties to give the German workers good reasons to become soldiers and thus give their lives in the imperialist slaughter. Noske declared himself a supporter of Oswald Spengler's proto-fascist Prussian socialism. Hitler wrote about Noske in 1933, saying he is, quote, an oak among these social democratic plants. When the news of the Kiel uprising reached the imperial government, Prince Max sent a reliable social democrat to calm the revolutionary fervor, and that man was Gustav Noske. Aside from a few politically conscious workers, the majority of the revolting masses were still confused about the various currents and what differentiates them. Another consequence of not constituting the Communist Party at an earlier point. Yes, the majority Social Democrats had supported the war, but now they were seemingly on their side. Maybe they had acknowledged their mistakes. Many striking workers were not socialists, and they did not yet differentiate between the parties calling themselves socialist. Many of them did not believe, or rather did not want to believe, that the SPD leadership was determined to defend the old system. Hence, the councils were not exclusively made up of revolutionary socialists. For instance, German sociologist Max Weber was part of the Workers' Council of Heidelberg, and he was pleasantly surprised that most members there were moderate liberals. Nonetheless, people were radicalizing quickly, and that process had to be reversed. Noske, a cunning and talented politician, eventually managed to sway the people to his side. He was so successful in doing so that the crowds proclaimed him governor of Kiel. Noske promised to meet the most urgent demands of the workers and soldiers of Kiel, such as pardons of mutineers in return for a more calm atmosphere. The next day, Noske called Berlin, saying he, quote, had only one hope, a voluntary return to order under social democratic leadership. Then the rebellion would collapse. Noske slowly but surely restored authority of the former officers and the police, and Prince Max was full of admiration for what Noske had accomplished at Kiel. Quote, the man has done superhuman things. Prince Max later wrote in his memoirs, quote, the fate of Germany depended on Ebert repeating his party comrades' achievement on a large scale, that is, rolling back the movement throughout the country. Appeasement through minor concessions and false promises. This trick was to be successful in undermining countless working-class movements in the coming decades all over the world. At the time, very few anticipated the tragedy that was about to ensue. It is reasonable to assume that not even the ruling classes themselves were confident they could turn things around. In the 7 days after November the 3rd, revolution was a certainty for much of the working class. The German monarchy had collapsed, and there was no parliament with any claim to power. The only organs with any authority were the workers' and soldiers' councils, and the new government in power called itself socialist, so it is no surprise that many regarded the revolution as completed. Unfortunately, it wasn't. For a revolution to be completed, toppling the old order is not enough. Establishing a new one is the other, in many ways, even harder part. But the masses who had managed to take over city after city had no cohesive plan for what to do with that power. The revolution had been largely spontaneous. It had no centralized leadership, but the counter-revolution did. Now, the trick of Noske in Kiel had to be repeated in many other places, and most crucially in Berlin, where the revolutionary movement had arrived on November 9th. Time was running out. As the new chancellor of a non-existing government, Friedrich Ebert planned to, quote, steer the revolution into orderly channels and defend the rule of law from anarchy. But these maneuvers were not enough to defeat the Marxists, because the workers' and soldiers' councils were still the main authority throughout the German Reich. They had to be won over, and so it was crucial for the MSPD to build a coalition with the USPD to form an executive based on the councils. The independents themselves had not full control over the councils, and so it was in the interest of the USPD right wing to form unity with the MSPD. Hugo Haase was especially interested in social democratic unity because power was shifting quickly to the left wing of the independents, led by Georg Ledebour and the Spartakists. The two parties wanted to...
This is an era where liberals, social democrats alike basically looked for or took advantage of the destabilized Germany in an effort to secure as much power as possible, and undermine the communist movement that was the most significant anti-fascist movement in Germany in the lead up to the Nazi rise of power. Okay? This is why I'm saying that what happened throughout history is happening once again, where in America, we don't even have fucking social democrats, really. We just have mostly liberals who are a more moderate version of the fascist movement in the United States of America. And history is repeating itself once again. Instead of actively undermining and trying to combat the growing fascist movement